Greetings everyone and welcome in this podcast. I will introduce you to the NATO Standardization Agreements, commonly known as their acronym Stanag. But beforehand, it is important to consider what is a standard within NATO and especially its purpose. 2 years after NATO's creation in 1949, the Alliance set up the NSO, the NATO Standardization Office. Standardization within NATO aims to enhance both an efficient and effective coordination in order to ensure interoperability not only among NATO member states, but also between the organization and its partner countries. Member countries shall thereupon adopt common standards to carry any international operation. Standardization treats everything related to operation, material, and administration, including common doctrines that ensure NATO to cooperate both together and with their allies. As a result, a standard is a ratified document either agreed by NATO nations or approved by one of the NATO-recognized bodies. Among all the existing NATO standards, this podcast focuses on the NATO Stanag. Stanags cover all the standardization documents stipulating each NATO country agreed to implement a standard in whole or in part with reservation or not in order to fulfill the significant interoperability. Standardization agreements may include military equipment, ammunition, supplies and stores, operational logistic and administrative procedures. All the current NATO Stanags, implemented or not, are registered, maintained and managed within the NATO Standardization Documents database under the responsibility of the NSO. Before we get to the heart of the matter, NATO implemented alongside a codification system, the NCS, which must not be confused with the NATO Standardization Agreements. The NCS is under the responsibility of a NATO cadre group involving the National Directors on Codification Allied Committee 135 and powered by the Conference of National Armament Directors. Actually, the NCS aims to increase interoperability and logistics systems effectiveness and logistics operation efficiency through a range of NATO stock numbers, each of which related to a specific item of supply. Those numbers are registered in each national database for immediate retrieval. If you require more information concerning the NCS, I recommend you to take a look at the guide to the NCS available online. The standardization process is separated in 7 different phases. This podcast will introduce those which may be of interest for us. First of all, the requirement identification consists of identifying either top-down standardization requirements or bottom-up standardization proposals. While the former is founded on a high-level directive, thus ratified by NATO directly, the latter shall begin with a standardization proposal. Once a requirement is identified, any interested party is invited to submit an SP to allow the relevant testing authority to develop a new NATO standardization document. The standardization proposal form is viable and accessible to everyone on the NSO website or annexed within the AAP03 directive. To be taken into consideration, the SP shall include at least the subject, the standardization requirement, its effect on interoperability, the possible solution, and the urgency of implementing. Everything is detailed within the proposal format. Afterwards, the SP shall first be submitted to the appropriate TA staff, as a result of which they can initiate the validation process. The tasking authorities are listed on the NSO website within the standardization section. if the suggested standard involves more than just one domain, or if identifying the relevant TA remains unclear, the SP shall be submitted to the NSO, which will take care of identifying the TA. Once a standard is implemented, a review shall be done every 5 years. However, if you either an interested party or a standardization proposal's author consider that a standard shall be reviewed, a modification proposal is at your disposal to be submitted to the relevant TA. The modification proposal format is available both on the NSO website and in the AAP03 directive. As a matter of fact, for a standardization proposal to be developed, NATO, involved partner countries, and NATO bodies are requested to fill in a standardization inquiry to know first whether the standard is needed and if they are motivated and able to develop it. Depending on the number of positive answers, the validation process will take place, or on the contrary, it will not. As I mentioned earlier, NATO Stanags are registered online within the NSDD. So if a company is interested in manufacturing a product conformally to an existing NATO Stanag, the interested company is free to do so. Even though developing a product adapted to a NATO Stanag can target a wider audience, the government can refuse purchasing them. Nevertheless, the government can require a company to produce a specific piece of equipment, but it usually concerns big procurement. Furthermore, a NATO member nation is not required to verify either a product complies with the relevant Stanag. The 29 allies shall trust each other. As a customer, you may be interested in purchasing a product conform to a NATO Stanag, but you shall find a way to acquire the involved product by yourself. However, each company is free to implement its own database, including its manufacturers. NATO does not possess its own product catalog, since each NATO member state is allowed to use and possess its own equipment, as long as they comply with NATO Stanags, of course. If you have more queries concerning Stanag, I encourage you to check the PowerPoint attached or to directly get in touch with the NSO either by phone, and you will be automatically redirected to the voicemail box, or by mail at nso@nso.nato.int. You will assuredly receive an answer within a couple of days, and I can confirm they will provide you exhaustive answers to your questions. Thanks for your attention.